I've been camping my entire life. Started when I was 6 years old, going on trips with my dad to state parks every summer. By the time I was in college, I was confident enough to go solo, spending a weekend alone in the woods, just me and my thoughts, away from phones and people and responsibilities. It was therapeutic, peaceful. At least, that's what I thought until 3 years ago. I'd planned a solo camping trip to Morrison State Forest, about 2 hours north of where I lived. It was early October, so the summer crowds were gone, but the weather was still decent. Cool at night, but not freezing. Perfect camping weather. I'd done this exact trip twice before. Always stayed at the same backcountry site about 4 miles in from the trailhead. Remote enough that you rarely saw other hikers, but not so far that you felt completely isolated. The site had everything I needed. A natural clearing protected from the wind, access to fresh water, enough deadfall nearby for firewood. I knew the area well, or at least I thought I did. I got to the trailhead around noon on a Friday. Signed in at the ranger station, told them which site I'd be at and when I planned to hike out Sunday morning. Standard procedure. The ranger, an older guy with a gray beard and weathered skin that spoke of decades outdoors, asked if I was going alone. When I said yes, he got this look on his face. Concerned. Almost frightened, though he tried to hide it. He told me there'd been some reports of unusual activity in that area. Hikers hearing strange sounds at night, feeling like they were being watched. One couple had abandoned their campsite in the middle of the night, left all their gear behind and ran back to their car. They refused to go back for it. The ranger's office still had their tent and sleeping bags in a storage room, unclaimed for 3 months. Nothing concrete, just a weird vibe that had spooked more than a few people. I thanked him for the warning, but said I'd be fine. I had Baristic spray, a whistle, knew how to handle myself in the woods. He shrugged and told me to be safe. I started hiking. The trail was familiar, winding through dense forest with occasional clearings where you could see the mountains in the distance. I made good time, reached my campsite around 3 p.m. It was exactly as I remembered. A small clearing next to a creek, a fire ring made of stones, a flat area perfect for pitching a tent. I set up camp, gathered firewood, filtered some water from the creek. By the time the sun started setting, I had a fire going and was cooking dinner over the flames. That's when I noticed the silence. I don't mean the normal quiet of the woods. I mean absolute silence. No birds, no insects, no rustling in the undergrowth. Just the sound of the fire, crackling and the creek running. It was unsettling in a way I couldn't quite articulate. The woods are never completely silent. There's always something making noise. I told myself I was being paranoid, that the Ijai ranger's warning had gotten into my head. I finished eating, cleaned my dishes in the creek, and sat by the fire reading a book with my headlamp. Around 9 p.m., I heard something. Footsteps. Not animal footsteps. Human footsteps. The deliberate crunch of boots on dead leaves and twigs, coming from the trail that led to my campsite. I stood up, grabbed my flashlight, called out, "Hello?" My voice sounded too loud in the silence. No response. The footsteps stopped. I waited, listening. Nothing. I called out again, asking if anyone was there. Still nothing. I convinced myself it was a deer or maybe another hiker passing by who hadn't heard me. I went back to my book, but I couldn't focus. Kept listening for these footsteps to start again. They did. Around 10 p.m. Same pattern. Slow, deliberate steps, coming toward my campsite, then stopping when I called out. This happened 3 more times over the next hour. Each time the footsteps got closer. Each time they stopped when I acknowledged them. I was genuinely scared now. I threw more wood on the fire, making it bigger, brighter, grabbed my bear spray and held it ready, called out 1 more time saying I was armed, and they should identify themselves or leave. The footsteps stopped. For about 20 minutes there was nothing. Then I heard breathing, just outside the circle of firelight, maybe 15 feet away. Heavy, raspy breathing, like someone who'd been running. I shined my flashlight toward the sound. The beam caught something. A figure, standing just at the edge of the trees. Tall, maybe 6.5 feet, but wrong somehow. The proportions weren't right. Arms too long. Head tilted at an odd angle. I yelled at it to get back, held up the bear spray. The figure didn't move. Just stood there breathing, watching me. I couldn't see a face. The flashlight beam wasn't strong enough, or maybe there was something about the way it was standing that kept its face in shadow, or maybe it didn't have a face at all. The thought made my stomach turn. Its breathing was wrong too. Not rhythmic, like a person's should be. It would pause for long stretches, 20 or 30 seconds of complete silence, then suddenly resume with a wet, gasping sound that made me think of someone drowning. The temperature had dropped. I could see my breath now, even standing right next to the fire. The air felt thick, oppressive, like the moment before a thunderstorm. We stayed like that for what felt like hours, but was probably only a few minutes. Me standing by the fire with bear spray raised, my arm shaking from the strain of holding it up. It standing in the darkness, breathing, watching me with whatever it used to see. Then it moved. Not toward me, sideways, circling my campsite, staying just outside the firelight, moving with a strange, gliding motion that didn't look like walking at all. I turned, keeping it in my flashlight beam, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. The beam would catch parts of it as it moved. An arm that hung down past where knees should be. A shoulder that curved wrong, too sharp, too angular. But never the face. No matter how I angled the light, its face stayed in shadow or blurred, or simply wasn't there. It circled my entire camp. Took maybe 5 minutes. Then it stopped, right back where it had started, and it spoke. Not words, not any language I recognized, just sounds, clicking and rasping and something that might have been humming. The sounds didn't come from where its mouth should be. They came from everywhere. From the trees, from the ground, from inside my own head. I felt them vibrating in my chest, in my bones. Felt them trying to pull something out of me, trying to make me respond in kind. I didn't sleep that night. I kept the fire burning, went through all my firewood, and started breaking dead branches I could reach from the campsite. The figure stayed there until dawn, just standing, breathing, making those sounds. When the sun started to rise, it stepped backward into the trees and disappeared. I packed up my tent as soon as there was enough light to see. Didn't bother with breakfast, just shoved everything into my pack and started hiking back to the trailhead. I kept looking over my shoulder, expecting to see it following me. I never did. But I could feel it. That sense of being watched, of something pacing me through the trees, just out of sight. I made it back to my car by 8 a.m., drove straight to the ranger station. The same ranger was there drinking coffee from a thermos, looking like he hadn't slept well either. I told him what happened, described the figure, the breathing, the sounds, the way it circled my camp all night. He listened, his expression getting more and more grim with every detail I shared. When I finished, he just nodded slowly, said I wasn't the first person to report something like that there'd been similar encounters going back years, decades actually. The first reports he knew of dated back to the 1960s. Tall figure, wrong proportions, standing just outside the firelight, always watching, never attacking, but never leaving either, always making those sounds that didn't come from any throat. He pulled out a file from his desk drawer, showed me incident reports, dozens of them, all describing the same thing. Some of the reports had drawings made by witnesses. I looked at them and felt sick. They all showed the same figure I'd seen, same impossible proportions, same blurred face. He said the Forest Service had investigated multiple times over the years, brought in experts, zoologists, anthropologists, paranormal researchers. Never found anything, no tracks, no evidence, no explanation, just scared hikers telling the same story over and over. He asked if I got a good look at its face. I said no. He said that was probably for the best, that the people who claimed they saw its face didn't come back to the forest, ever. Some of them didn't go into any forest after that. Something about seeing its face broke them in a way he couldn't quite explain. He showed me a photo from one of the reports. A man in his 50s, sitting in what looked like a hospital room, staring at nothing. The ranger said the man had been an experienced outdoorsman, Eagle Scout, survival instructor. He'd gone camping alone and come back 3 days later, catatonic. Wouldn't speak, wouldn't eat. Just stared straight ahead with this expression of absolute terror frozen on his face. He'd stayed like that for 2 weeks before he finally came out of it enough to talk. All he would say was that he'd seen its face, that he understood now, that they were waiting, all of them, waiting in every forest, every patch of trees, every dark place where humans built fires and thought they were safe. The man killed himself 6 months later, left a note that said he couldn't stop seeing it, that it was always there when he closed his eyes, that the only way to make it stop was to stop seeing anything at all. I haven't been back to Morrison State Forest, haven't been camping alone since. I still love the woods, but I only go with other people now, and I never stay after dark, because I know that thing is still out there, still circling campsites, still making those sounds that don't come from any throat, still waiting for someone to see its face. My second story comes from my friend Marcus. He told me about this experience 4 years ago, and it's the reason he refuses to go camping anymore. Won't even sleep in a cabin if it's surrounded by woods. Marcus used to be an avid outdoorsman, hiking, camping, backpacking, all of it. He'd take week-long trips into remote wilderness areas, places where you wouldn't see another person for days. He loved the solitude, the challenge of being self-sufficient. He'd been doing it for over a decade without incident. Then he went to the Cascade Mountains in Washington, August, middle of summer. He'd planned a 5-day loop trail that would take him through some of the most remote backcountry in the state. He was experienced, well-equipped, knew what he was doing. The first 2 days were perfect. Beautiful weather, stunning views, no problems. He saw maybe 3 other hikers the entire time, just brief encounters on the trail. He'd wave, they'd wave. Everyone kept moving. On the evening of the second day, he set up camp in a small meadow surrounded by dense forest. He was about 20 miles from the nearest road, deep in the wilderness. He cooked dinner, watched the sunset, crawled into his tent around 9 p.m. The plan was to get an early start the next morning, cover another 10 miles before setting up camp again. He fell asleep quickly, tired from the day's hiking. He woke up around midnight, not sure why at first. Then he heard it, whistling. Someone was whistling a tune he didn't recognize, something melodic but off-key. The sound was coming from the forest, maybe 50 yards from his tent. Marcus lay there listening. The whistling continued for a few minutes, then stopped. He waited, but it didn't start again. He convinced himself it was another camper, someone who'd set up nearby and was just walking around their site. Weird to be doing it at midnight, but people were weird sometimes. He was drifting back to sleep when he heard footsteps, someone walking around his tent. Not close, maybe 10 feet away, but definitely circling. Slow, deliberate steps. Marcus called out, asked who was there. The footsteps stopped. No answer. He unzipped his tent and looked out. It was a clear night, full moon, enough light to see pretty well. The meadow was empty, no one there, no other tents. He could see the tree line all around, dark and still. He called out again. Nothing. Marcus got out of his tent with his flashlight, walked around his campsite checking. No footprints except his own. No signs that anyone had been there. He felt foolish. Probably just a deer or elk walking through. He went back to his tent and tried to sleep. The whistling started again around 2 a.m. Closer this time. Maybe 30 yards away. Same tune, same off-key melody. Marcus sat up in his sleeping bag, listening. The whistling moved. Not toward him, but around him, circling his campsite the same way the footsteps had. He grabbed his flashlight and shined it toward the sound. The whistling stopped immediately. He could see the trees, the meadow, nothing else. He kept the light on, sweeping it back and forth. Nothing moved. Then the whistling started again, right behind his tent. So close, it sounded like someone was standing inches from the fabric. Marcus spun around, shined the light at the tent wall. He could see the shadow of the tent poles, his gear inside, nothing else. But the whistling continued. Right there, right behind him. He could hear breathing between the notes. Wet, labored breathing. He spent the rest of the night with his flashlight on, sitting upright in his sleeping bag, listening to the whistling move around his tent. Sometimes close, sometimes far. Always that same tune. Always stopping when he pointed the light at it, then starting again from a different direction. When the sun came up, the whistling stopped. Marcus didn't wait. He packed up his gear as fast as he could and started hiking back the way he'd come. He didn't care about finishing the loop. He just wanted out. He'd gone maybe 2 miles when he heard it again. The whistling. Behind him on the trail. He stopped. The whistling stopped. He started walking. The whistling started. He tried walking faster. The whistling kept pace. He ran. The whistling stayed right behind him, never getting closer, never falling behind. Just there. Following. Marcus said the worst part wasn't the whistling itself. It was that he never saw what was making it. He'd stop, turn around, shine his light down the trail. Nothing, just empty trail and forest. But the second he turned back and started walking, the whistling would resume. Like whatever it was could only exist when he wasn't looking directly at it, and the tune never changed. Same melody over and over, burned into his brain. Years later, he told me he still hears it sometimes. In the shower when the water's running. in the white noise of traffic, in the wind through trees. That same off-key melody, just at the edge of hearing. A reminder that some things don't stay in the woods. Some things follow you home. This went on for hours. Marcus ran until he couldn't run anymore, then walked as fast as he could, his lungs burning, his legs cramping. The whistling never stopped, never varied. Just that same melody over and over, always right behind him. He said he started to lose his mind, started imagining what kind of thing could follow him for miles through rough terrain, whistling that same tune, never getting tired, never showing itself. His mind created horrific images, something tall and thin, keeping pace with impossible strides, its legs bending at wrong angles, something with no face, just a hole where the mouth should be, whistling through exposed teeth and gums. Something that had been in those woods for decades, centuries maybe, waiting for someone to hear its song. And once you heard it, once you acknowledged it by trying to find the source, it claimed you, marked you as its own. And now, the more he thought about it, the more certain he became that this was true. That he'd made a terrible mistake by calling out that first night, by asking who was there, because now it knew he could hear it. Now it would never stop following. He made it back to his car around 4 p.m. The whistling followed him all the way to the parking lot. He threw his gear in the trunk, jumped in the car, started the engine. The whistling was right outside his window. He could see the trees, the parking lot, other cars, nothing else. But the whistling continued. He drove away, didn't look back. The whistling faded as he got farther from the trailhead. By the time he reached the main highway, it was gone. Marcus said he tried to rationalize it for weeks afterward, told himself it was another hiker playing a prank, or some kind of bird or animal he wasn't familiar with, or that the isolation and exhaustion had made him hallucinate. But he couldn't convince himself. He knew what he'd heard, knew it had followed him, knew it had been intelligent, deliberate, waiting for something. He did some research, found stories online from other hikers who'd experienced similar things. The whistling in the woods, the sense of being followed by something that stayed just out of sight, the feeling that something was pacing you just beyond the trees, matching your speed perfectly. Some of the stories mentioned that the whistling would eventually stop, not because the thing left, but because it got what it wanted. Marcus asked what that meant, what it wanted. The responses were vague, but they all said the same thing, that when the whistling stopped, when the thing finally showed itself, people disappeared. Search parties would find their gear, their tent, their belongings all neatly arranged, their phones and wallets, even their shoes, placed side by side as if they'd stepped out of them deliberately. But the person would be gone, just vanished into the woods with no trace, no footprints leading away, no signs of struggle, just gone like they'd evaporated into mist. He never went back to the Cascades, never finished that loop trail. He sold all his camping gear 6 months later, said he couldn't even look at it without hearing that whistling in his head. Said sometimes, late at night when his apartment is quiet, he still hears it. Faint, distant, but there. Like whatever was in those woods is still following him, still whistling, still waiting. My last story is the most recent. It happened to me just 8 months ago, and it's the reason I'm telling you these stories. Because I need someone else to know, to understand what's out there. I was camping with my girlfriend Sarah in the Appalachian Mountains. We'd planned this trip for months, booked a campsite at a remote location about 7 miles from the nearest road. It was supposed to be romantic. A long weekend away from the city. Just the two of us, reconnecting with nature. We arrived on a Friday afternoon in late September. The fall colors were just starting to show, the air crisp and cool. Perfect camping weather. We hiked in, set up our tent, gathered firewood. Everything was normal. Sarah was in a great mood, excited about the trip. We cooked dinner over the fire, talked about our plans for the weekend. Maybe do some day hikes, find a good spot to watch the sunset. Normal couple stuff. That night we went to bed around 10 p.m. We were both tired from the hike and the drive. We zipped up the tent, got into our sleeping bags, and within minutes, Sarah was asleep. I took a little longer, but eventually I drifted off too. I woke up to Sarah shaking me. It was still dark. She was whispering urgently, telling me to wake up. I asked what was wrong. She put her hand over my mouth and pointed to the tent wall. Outside, I could hear movement, something large, walking around our tent. The footsteps were heavy, deliberate. Too heavy to be a deer, too deliberate to be a bear. We lay there frozen, listening to it circle our tent. Once, twice, 3 times. Then it stopped. Right at the entrance, we could hear breathing, slow and deep. Human breathing. Someone was standing outside our tent, inches from the zipper. I grabbed my flashlight, ready to yell at whoever it was to back off. But before I could, Sarah grabbed my arm. She shook her head violently, her eyes wide with fear. She mouthed the words, "Don't move." We waited. The breathing continued. 5 minutes. 10. 15. Just standing there breathing. Then we heard another sound. Scratching. Something was scratching at the tent fabric. Not clawing like an animal. Deliberate, methodical scratching. Like someone drawing on the tent with a fingernail. Sarah was crying silently, tears running down her face. I was terrified, but also angry. Who the hell was out there messing with us like this? I decided to confront them. I reached for the tent zipper. Sarah grabbed my hand so hard her nails dug into my skin. She was shaking her head frantically, mouthing, "No, no, no." But I was done being scared. I yanked the zipper down and shined my flashlight outside. There was nothing there. The campsite was empty. Fire burned down to embers, our gear exactly where we'd left it. No footprints around the tent except our own from earlier. But I could still hear the breathing. It was coming from everywhere now. From the trees, from the ground, from the air itself. Then I saw them. Eyes. Dozens of pairs of eyes, reflecting in my flashlight beam, surrounding our tent in a wide circle. Not animal eyes, the wrong height, the wrong spacing. They were at human eye level, maybe 6 feet off the ground. But there were too many of them. Scattered through the trees, all around us, all watching. I pulled back into the tent and zipped it shut so fast I nearly broke the zipper. Sarah and I huddled together in the center of the tent, not speaking, barely breathing. The scratching started again. Multiple points now, all around the tent, like fingers, dozens of fingers, all drawing on the fabric simultaneously. This continued until dawn. We didn't sleep, didn't move, just held each other and waited for the sun to come up. Sarah was shaking so badly I could hear her teeth chattering. I kept thinking about those eyes. 47 pairs. That meant 47 of them out there, surrounding us, scratching their marks into our tent, claiming us for something I couldn't understand. the worst part was the sound. Not just the scratching, but underneath it, a low humming. Multiple voices, if you could call them voices, humming in harmony. The same note held for minutes at a time, then shifting to a different pitch. It was hypnotic and horrifying at the same time. I felt myself starting to drift, to lose focus, like the humming was pulling me somewhere. Sarah dug her nails into my arm hard enough to draw blood, and it snapped me back. When the first light started filtering through the tent fabric, the scratching stopped. The humming stopped. The breathing stopped. The eyes disappeared. We waited until it was fully light before we opened the tent. The campsite looked normal, peaceful. Morning sun filtering through the trees, birds singing, like nothing had happened, except our tent. The outside of our tent was covered in scratches, hundreds of them, overlapping, chaotic, covering every inch of the fabric. And they formed patterns, not random scratches, deliberate designs, symbols I didn't recognize. We packed up in silence, didn't speak until we were a mile down the trail. Sarah finally asked me if I'd seen the eyes. I said yes. She asked how many. I said dozens. She nodded and said she'd counted them while I was looking. 47 pairs of eyes. 94 eyes total, all watching us. We made it back to the car by noon, threw our gear in the trunk. Sarah got in the passenger seat and just stared straight ahead. I started the engine. That's when I saw it in the rear-view mirror. Standing at the edge of the parking lot, right where the trail emerged from the trees. A figure, tall and thin, with 2 long arms hanging at its sides. I couldn't see its face. It was blurred somehow, like my eyes couldn't focus on it. I looked at Sarah. She was staring at the side mirror, her face white. She could see it too. I asked if we should call someone, report what happened. She just shook her head, said we needed to leave. Now. I drove away, didn't look back. But Sarah did. She watched the mirror for the first 20 miles. Finally, I asked if it was still there. She said no, that it had stopped at the edge of the parking lot, hadn't followed us. But there were more of them now, standing in a line along the tree line. She'd counted 17 figures, all tall and thin, all with those blurred faces, all watching our car drive away. We threw away the tent when we got home. Didn't want to keep it, didn't want those symbols anywhere near us. But I took photos first, dozens of them from every angle. Sent them to a friend who studies folklore and symbols, a professor at the university who specialized in indigenous cultures and pre-colonial artifacts. He called me 3 days later. His voice was shaking. Said he'd found some of the symbols in old texts, pre-colonial stuff. Native American warnings carved into trees and painted on rocks. Markers meant to keep people away from certain areas, sacred places, forbidden places. He said the symbols roughly translated to marked and counted and claimed. But there was another one he'd found. A symbol, and repeated 7 times on our tent. He hesitated before telling me what it meant. Finally said it translated to something like witnessed or seen us. Not that we had seen them, but that they had seen us. Really seen us. Seen something in us or about us that marked us as different, as chosen. Sarah and I broke up 2 months later. It wasn't dramatic, we just couldn't be around each other without remembering that night, without seeing those eyes in our minds, without feeling like we were still being watched. I moved to a different city, somewhere with no forests nearby, lots of concrete and steel and light. But sometimes late at night, I look out my window at the city lights, and I swear I can see them. Standing on rooftops, in alleyways, at the edges of parking lots. Those tall, thin figures with blurred faces, watching, waiting. I think we were marked that night. Sarah and I. I think those things in the woods claimed us somehow, and now they're following, counting, waiting for the right moment to finish whatever they started. Sarah texted me last week. First time in months. She said she's seeing them too, in her new city 3 states away. Standing outside her apartment building at night, following her to work in the morning, always staying just far enough back that she can't get a clear look, always just at the edge of her vision, disappearing when she turns to look directly at them, always counting. She can hear them sometimes, she said. Late at night, when everything's quiet. That low humming we heard in the tent, coming through the walls, coming from the air vents, coming from nowhere and everywhere. She asked if I thought we could ever get away from them, if moving farther would help. Maybe to another country, maybe somewhere across an ocean, if there was anywhere we could go where they wouldn't follow. She said she's afraid to sleep, afraid that one night she'll wake up to find her apartment walls covered in scratches. Those symbols carved into every surface, marking her again, claiming her again. I didn't know what to tell her, because the truth is, I don't think distance matters. I don't think we can run from something that's marked us, something that's claimed us. I think those things are patient. I think they can wait years, decades, lifetimes, and eventually they'll come to collect whatever it is they think we owe them. So I don't go into the woods anymore. I don't camp. I don't hike. I stay in the city with the lights and the noise and the crowds. Because at least here, when I see those figures watching me from the shadows, I can pretend they're just people. Just strangers going about their business. I can pretend that everything's normal, that I'm safe. But I know the truth, I know what's waiting, and I know that someday, probably when I least expect it, the counting will end, and they'll come for me, all 47 of them. Or maybe more by now. Maybe they've been gathering, calling others, building their numbers, waiting for the right moment. I try not to think about it. But every time I see a forest, every time I smell pine trees or hear wind through leaves, I remember. I remember those eyes, those scratches on the tent, those symbols that meant marked and counted and claimed and witnessed. And I wonder how much longer I have. How much longer before they decide the waiting is over? Sometimes I dream about it, about waking up to find those symbols scratched into my bedroom walls, about opening my curtains to see 47 pairs of eyes staring back at me from the street below, about hearing that humming again, coming from everywhere at once, pulling me towards something I can't see, but know is waiting. I wake up from these dreams in a cold sweat, my heart racing, and I check every window, every door. Make sure the locks are secure. Make sure I'm still alone. But I know it's only a matter of time. They're patient. They've been waiting in those woods for longer than I can imagine. And now they're waiting for me.